Fox News contributor Paul Mauro is here. Paul, you spent a long time as a cop. The fact that the officers talked to him and he continued answering questions before they read him his rights, do you think that's going to be a thorny issue for the judge in this case?
Well, let's first recognize that everything that's happening here is very pro forma and typical. Mangione has hired some high-powered attorneys, and it's their job to challenge everything that occurred at every stage, and they're doing that. Now, as far as the Miranda goes, the formula for Miranda is actually quite simple and then gets quite complicated. It is custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. And so what the court will do is look at those two prongs. Was he in custody? And there are metrics for that. And was he, in fact, interrogated? And understand that asking basic questions like, who are you? Why are you here? Don't necessarily constitute an interrogation. Those are common law right of inquiry questions that the police are allowed to ask. That's where it gets complicated. It gets very fact specific. Custody usually comes down to the following. There's a general metric for it. Would an objective observer feel like the person was free to leave, or did they feel like they were confined and unable to leave? And that gets down to things like how many cops were there? Were they surrounding him? What were they saying? An interrogation, as I said, goes to the type of questions. So relative to Miranda, they're going to look at that timeline, and they're going to try to ascertain, that is, the court will ascertain, was he in custody? Was he being interrogated? And if he answered anything before that, that's where they're going to look to get the stuff thrown out. Now, we should understand, the courts give a lot of deference to the police in these circumstances, especially in a case like this. I don't think there's a judge in the country that wants to be part of letting Mangione go in any way, shape, or form here. He's innocent until proven guilty. But the case is compelling. And then the backpack will be a separate issue.
Yeah. Everybody in the country was kind of on edge. They knew about this case. It was so high profile, so public, so much of it on video. So these officers show up. I mean, routine patrol officers. One of them had been on the job for just a few months, as I recall, and start asking this guy questions in a McDonald's on a case that they almost certainly knew about. You got to believe that, just asking some questions was that reading him his Miranda rights necessarily wasn't top of mind for them.
That's likely true, but I would propose a nuance here, John, and that's the fact that it was probably a break that we got an officer who was relatively recently out of the academy. I say that because one of the things they drill into you in the academy is Miranda. Yeah. And all of those procedures and processes were likely front of mind for this officer. They put their body cam cameras on right away. The whole thing was captured, which is the right formula. That's the right procedure. So I go to the fact that he was recently out of the academy, not necessarily a vulnerability for the police here, as long as the procedures ultimately were followed. Understand that relative to the backpack, this is almost certainly going to come in. Miranda will probably hold up for them as well here because a lot of his statements were given, from what I'm hearing, voluntarily. He never invoked. He never said, I want a lawyer. He just said, I think I'll stay silent. But then he started answering questions. But relative to the backpack, by that point, they had probable cause. Once you have probable cause, you're allowed to search his effects that are within his area. The legal term, at least in New York, is lungible, grabbable, stuff that he can get to. And that means the backpack is fully in play, and the contents of that backpack, a manifesto, the gun that tracks to the ballistics, all of this stuff. The fake name he gave is the same name as the person who was at the hostel up on the Upper West Side here in New York before the shooting. All of these are very, very compelling pieces of evidence, and it's going to be very difficult to overcome.
Yeah, really quickly, I want to put up a couple of the things that were found in that backpack. A 3D printed 9mm handgun that matches the firearm linked to the murder, as well as a journal with writings about parasitic health insurance companies. His lawyers have asked that those be tossed out. Well, if he's carrying the gun that was used in the murder, Paul, doesn't seem very likely that the judge is going to just toss that evidence.
No, I think it's very, very unlikely. Look, there's a lot of compelling evidence here. The gun, remember, he had the messages that were written on the bullets. You've got the manifesto. You don't need motive, but it's very, very clearly there. The people these days and jurors, they want the CSI effect. They want science. You're going to get that from the ballistics with it matching to the gun. One of the things I will say here that I have questions about is how this guy, who was not part of the underworld or anything like that, managed to get a hold of a 3D printed gun. To me, that's one of the unanswered questions here relative to when he went dark during his travels in San Francisco and then he went overseas. Doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that have ready access to something like that. I'm wondering where he got that, who assisted him. There are still some questions here that may or may not come out at trial, but at the end of the day here, this is the state case that's going first. Apparently, the evidence is very compelling. We may never even get to a federal case. And I think that he's really got his work cut out for him, as does do his attorneys.
And the video of that day shows that the gunman knew how to operate the gun because it jammed, and he cleared the jam and fired a second shot. Fox News contributor Paul Mauro. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.